Riël, it's really nice of you to join us. I've known Riël Mallan for many years, and he's done all kinds of interesting things in the time that I've known him. And he's agreed to join us today and talk about
whatever comes up.
To chew the breeze and talk about agriculture and all the other things that we have to talk about. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a long time coming. We've been trying our best.
Indeed.
Our best to get together for months. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, Riël, for the people that don't know, who are you? Where did you come from?
So I grew up on a table grape farm not far from here, actually, where we're sitting here in Wellington at the old tannery. Probably as the crow flies, probably 5 kilometers from here. My father was a table grape farmer. We moved, I think, to Paarl, where he bought the table grape farm in the late 80s, which was a very tough and difficult time. We were, at that stage, still very much, it's pre-democracy in South Africa and deregulation of the fruit industry. We had all the boards, we had the maize board and egg board, and specifically in our case, we had the deciduous fruit board. And yeah, so grew up in that time, sanctions busting. We were packing grapes. I remember vividly we were packing a box Oceanic, which had the product of Swaziland on it, in order to sidestep sanctions. So yeah, grew up in that time, and then lived through the change in obviously in government, and then deregulation of the fruit industry, until I ended up leaving the fruit industry probably about 6 years ago, when I sold my interest in the Unlimited Group, and then pursued other things. So long 35, 40-year history and all of that. Yeah.
Wow.
So I would also like to take you back to the change and the deregulation of the South African fruit industry. And as you said earlier, you were a young man at that time, and things were changing rapidly. It was a scary and exciting time. And tell us what a young man in his 20s who was a table grape farmer did at that time, and how did things unfold?
Yeah, so I took over I joined the family farming operation in 94, just after I finished at Stellenbosch. And, you don't know much about anything. You think you do, but you don't.
Yes.
And then joined the family farming operation, just to sort of realize that for a host of reasons, we were not in good financial shape. So there were difficult currency times. You'll remember the run on the rand that Christophe tried to stem. So interest rates went to 25%. Inflation used to be quite high, came down. So all of a sudden, the differential between inflation and interest rates were massive. So the realization at a very young stage for me in my career was that we had to do something very differently, very quickly. And you had a sense that you were being led down the garden path by the boards of that time. And it was just typical old bureaucracies. I mean, any unvetted power ends up being either inefficient or corrupt, and which we're seeing at the moment in this country as well. And at that stage, it was just one of those centralized organizations. It's been there since the 40s, I think, when it was instituted by the National Party government. So my sense as a young man at that stage, we had to do something radical, as young men do.
Indeed.
And, we had all kinds of things. I think we set up, in those days, the Independent Fruit Growers Association, which was effectively myself, Marlene Hoekstra, and Derek Clift, but supported by many, and had a big voice and a loud voice, but we actually were not that many, and engaged with Derek Hanekom, and we had all kinds of interesting interactions at that stage, which then led ultimately to the deregulation of the fruit industry, which was massive, because you had for 40, 50 years, you had the boards. We then had the elections in 94, which obviously was a big change for everyone. And then in 97, we had deregulation. And I was lucky enough at that stage, a year before deregulation, myself and 2 others were involved in the first permits that were issued. So we were never allowed to export fruits ourselves. And the first permits were issued only to 3. And it was interesting. I mean, at that stage, I think I was overseas once in my life. I bought myself a suit and I got on a plane and flew to the UK, figured out how the tubes worked and saw a couple of customers, and then flew to France and saw 1 or 2 customers there, and flew to Germany. And that year we ended up exporting, I think, 100,000 boxes or something of grapes. And that was the start of a much bigger and much longer commercial career in agricultural exports and food, which ultimately I'm still in at the moment.
Do you struggle to get beautiful photographs of fresh produce? Visit our stock site. We've got gorgeous photographs of all kinds of fresh produce.
So, as a young man, buying a suit and going to see people in Europe.
And who did you know who to see?
Yes, and today, people do that all the time. But I think it's important to also just go back and say how radically different that was to do then. Because when the boards told you what to do, you didn't argue. You just, if they said jump, you said how high, and that's what you did. So suddenly for a young man to actually go and do that was like close to...
Stupid, yes.
Well, yeah, it was certainly different, and it was certainly out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And it must have been very interesting. And the start of what you said went a long way down after that.
I mean, if I look back at it, and my father always had this saying, meer moed is verstand. I mean, that was... I mean, it was... someone up there looked after me because, I mean, with a level of knowledge and naivety that we went into that, there could only be one outcome, and that was for you to lose your boots and your underpants and everything else that you had on you. So, and I didn't in the first year or 2, which I cannot take credit for. But the reality was that outside of the boards, there were no expertise.
None.
I mean, there were 2-3 companies at that stage which had fairly big local operations. 2 or 3 companies that had some experience with exports, on non-deregulated products, like specifically subtropicals were non-regulated for some reason. Things like melons and so those things were sort of almost training grounds. But by and large, all of the knowledge was sitting with the boards, and then the board-appointed agent, which was Capespan at that stage. And we had this wonderful brand, Cape, which now in retrospect that's probably the thing that was handled the worst, in the sense that we had a real presence in the international markets as the region. I mean, you look at how the Italians do it, the Parma region with Parmigiano, the cheese, and Parma ham, how they were able to have a deregulated commercial environment, but you have this one brand. And we had that brand, we had that presence. So that was handled badly by all of us, I think. I mean, we lost a lot as a country because we lost that. But anyway, so when all of that happened, we went into the world and started learning. So all of the knowledge that you're seeing in our sector has been great, the fruit sector, in selling many, many, many millions of boxes more than was sold at that stage. All of that has been developed in the last 22, 25 years. So, but yeah, the start was rocky
Turbulent.
and shaky. Yeah.
Turbulent.
Exciting, but turbulent, yes.
Yes. And then you went on, after that, after you were a table grape farmer, you went on to become involved with Fruits Unlimited. Tell us how that developed. What was that? How did that happen?
Yeah, so the first year or 2 we went on our own, and was fine. It was the markets were hungry, and we were first movers, so we had the opportunity to secure some half decent programs. I was involved briefly in the establishment of a small company that didn't work out, which is still around. I won't mention the name. And then did my own thing for a couple of years, and then realized you need to professionalize it. So still farming, doing direct exports, but we were in a small window. We were in the Paarl region, right in the middle, so we had to expand They wanted grapes, the customers from early to late. I mean, the whole story. And we then met up with 2 other families. That says the Strauss family out of Blopitz and the Van Niekerk family out of Saron. And we then established a small business with the idea to just do our own product, which would have then been from early to late.
Yes.
And we put together a small team. That was in 2000. So that was deregulated in 97. Did my own thing for a few years. And then in 2000, we put together this small team of 6-7 people and started doing it for ourselves. The first year was good. And then expanded too quickly. We took on 2 very big growers and moved from, I think, 600,000, 700,000 boxes and hit 2.5, 3 million in the second year, which was good, but also a disaster on many levels. And then the commercial journey started, really, where Fruits Unlimited was the first business of a few that we started, and then later merged with an operation called Yukon International about 6-7 years in 2006-07, which gave us a presence in specialty exports as well. We started an import business in that time, or a Woolworths supply business called Fruition, which is still at this stage one of the main suppliers of imported grapes and other produce to Woolies. We expanded, started investing in varietals and genetics. 20 years, it's interesting. The first varieties we bought 20 years ago is really only in full production now, I would say, which is Flavor Fall is now the biggest commercial plum. Probably that was we invested in that quite early on. So very, very long-term investments that you have to make. We went into processing. We had a fresh cut operation, still have juices, fresh cut in the north. And then, consistently went on to investing in genetics, of which almonds and nuts were sort of the last major project that I did before my co-founder, Isak Strauss, and myself sold our stake in the business in 2021. So it's now going on 5 years that I'm out of the business. Yeah.
So from having started as a producer, working through the exporter, seller, shipper part of the industry, and now you have moved along to something else. I think I want to ask you about something from a bit further back, because I had the question from people at SATI, people that work there now. Do you know anything, they asked me, do you know anything about the establishment of SATI way back when? How did that happen?
Oh, yes. No, that's...
So I said, I know something, but I think you know even more than I do. So tell us about the process of that happening, and also, how things fell apart before they started to come together again.
Like all good things, you need to sort of first have it fall apart and go back to zero. Yeah, so I think the first 2 years post deregulation was the international market was very hungry. A lot of it was still sitting, a lot of the bulk of the product was still sitting with the old board appointed agents, Cape Span, at that stage. And within 2 years, it fragmented to the point where everyone was just doing his own thing and gunning for the best possible return. But there was absolutely no coordination at all between it. We did not have a database. We did not know what was coming, what was going, what was shipped in a particular week, where did it go to, which markets. It was very easy when it was centralized, but obviously when you all of a sudden had 30, 40, 50
sounds like the Wild West.
It was the Wild West. It really was the Wild West. So, and then we hit a particularly bad year, and I can't remember. I think it was was it 2000? Was it 99, 2000?
2000.
Where we had a complete market collapse, and we had returns far below break even. So I distinctly remember we had a co-op meeting, and we all got exceptionally drunk that evening because we were all so deep in trouble. None of us could pay our co-op accounts. And then we had a couple of meetings, and I wrote a an open letter to just I think it was the Berg River Table Grape Association. So how I saw it from a structure perspective, what's happening. That letter found its way into our fax machines at that stage.
Yes,
still.
we still had those things then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we ended up having 2-3 industry meetings where we put the main issue of not having coordination and not having structure on the table. And we formed what we called the BTR at those stages, which is the Berg River Table Grape Association, which was basically all the growers signing up for this central organization to assist in coordinating all of this, to getting all of this back to some sort of a structure. That was duplicated in the north, and I was then elected as chair of the BTR. In the north, exactly the same thing happened. Harvey Nieuwoud at those days, he was elected as the OTR, the Orange River Table Grape Association, and Johan Kriegler was the Hex River, the HTR. And effectively, I made more enemies, I think, in 6 months than I made in my previous life put together, and then the rest of my life after that. But we got the growers to sign up to a memorandum of incorporation where we, as let's call it the management those days, would accredit a number of exporters. And those accredited exporters, so that was the one part of it, would then be able to go and procure, but we wanted to reduce the export, or just the base of how many people were actually entering the market. And the second part of the associations was to get the quality standards up, because we started to see very quickly that anyone was putting anything in a box and sending it out. And the third part of it was to get information back up and running. And if you remember, your husband Bruce was quite involved in it, and then we appointed 1 or 2 consultants, and they started with this process of starting to just get central points of collecting data and processing that data and weekly sending it out in order for those who make the allocation decisions to be in a better position to do so. And lo and behold, the first year there was structure, and we can't take all the credit. These things go in such cycles. What happens in the northern hemisphere, but also starting from such a low base, we had to do better than we did the previous year, and that then sort of morphed. And out of that, SATI, South African Table Grape Association, was formed as these two organizations came together and started to align their interests to where it's now. And when I started the business, I had to withdraw. I didn't want to initially, but I was sort of asked very politely to withdraw because I couldn't be judge and juror. And I think then it took a life of its own. And if I listened the other day to one of your talks actually, where the numbers were put out there of how much is actually being exported at the moment. It's staggering.
Yes, it is.
I think when I left the industry, or when I sort of was still involved, we did about 25-30 million boxes. I think it's now up to 80 or 90. What is it?
78 or something?
Upper 70s,
Yeah.
yes, on table grapes.
So it's staggering what the industry has been able to achieve in terms of just how much volume they move. And that is on the back of just good systems, good coordination, and I think the industry coming of age. And it's not only us, it's Chile, it's Peru, all these places. I'm not so familiar with the numbers anymore, but they all developed a lot as well. And then things like blueberries came on board, which started competing with things like grapes, and so it's much more competitive than it was 15, 20 years ago. But the industry seemed to be coping with it. So
Indeed. And then just something else about that time is that things did fall apart, and a lot of things like the research part of the previously organized systems, a lot of those people ended up kind of not sure of job security, and a huge amount of those people ended up going abroad. So when you look in the international fruit industry, you find a lot of South Africans scattered around the world in the fruit industry, and a lot of them left kind of at that time and took expertise with them.
yeah.
So in a strange way, we exported quite a lot of expertise. And then in response to what you were saying about trying to coordinate and reduce the number of exporters to ones that were a little bit, you would be a little bit more comfortable trusting. I think that also was part of the founding of the Fresh Produce Exporters Forum.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
Could you expand on that a little bit,
Yeah,
please?
I wasn't so involved in that. So I was still on the other side of the table, but that obviously there was a similar reaction on the commercial side of things, which I then later joined the other side of the table. But yes, I mean, like all free for all, quick, large type of opportunities, it would attract rogues, and it did. And many a grower lost his farm and his boots on some of these unscrupulous operators, and the reaction and rightly so, of the commercial fraternity or the exporter fraternity was to establish something similar. And over time, I think the two organizations started working very closely together. Lots of fireworks in between, but it got to the point where I think we now have significant players in the sector where there's been a lot of integration, and I think you're seeing a lot of that globally, where the lines are blurring. You're not seeing you're seeing fully integrated players straight from production to distribution and sales, which is a global phenomenon. It's not only South Africa, but that's, I think, just a testimony of the industry maturing and coming of age.
What I wanted to ask about that is, obviously back then, when you guys started with this whole process, is that at that stage, if I'm correct, you were about 3-4 years that you were doing your own business. So you had the background experience. And I would presume that most of them were just farmers that didn't have that kind of business experience.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that must have counted in your favor.
Well, I mean, again, being 28,
or into the industry's
being
favor.
28, you thought you had the experience, but it was limited. There were very few people in the industry that could say they had experience, and they had. But as they say, fake it until you make it. So,
Yes. Also, 1 year's experience is with that other one. Then you've got more experience.
in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's I think that it was part of the reason why these things sort of had to happen. We had to do some radical steps and interventions to just get some sort of order into the sector, which all these organizations ended up facilitating and creating. But it was, I mean, there was there was a lot of money lost and a lot of livelihoods lost in those days. But yeah, that's, I suppose that's the nature of life.
And how much of that experience that you gained back then, dealing with all these boards and all these different individuals, has helped you in what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, I told somebody the other day, I was telling Louise that we spoke about sort of the training ground that the fruit sector has been. And in the industry that I'm now, I'm actually appointing quite a few people out of the fruit sector in what I do now, and we can talk about that.
Yes, please do.
Now, but the principle, I think, which is, there's two things that stands out for me, that the margins in the fruit industry, in the fresh produce industry, not only the fruit industry, is paper thin. And what it necessitates for you to be is really on top of your game when it comes to financial management, costings. It's the one part of it. I look at the industries where I'm now involved in now, is the margins are significantly better, and that assists you to take far longer term views. But what it did for me is that you become very frugal. So your margins, if you're lucky, let's say 6-7% margin. I don't know what I understand it's even lower today. And if you were lucky, you walked out of it with a net margin of 1.5 to 2%. So within that context, a small little mistake, and you would wipe out this year and next year, and maybe even 2 or 3 years margin down the track. So that taught me a lot. And I think the other part that stands out for me in sectors that I'm now is, because there's margin in these sectors, we can afford to take longer term views. So we can afford to invest in brands. We can afford to invest in research that will only give us returns in 3-4 years down the track or 10 years down the track. So I think the one thing that was lost and that is a problem in low margin industries is that it's difficult to invest for the future, and it's difficult to invest in brands and things that's not going to give you immediate results.
Yes.
And that's always been, something that was sort of handled by government and through your taxes and your and the subsidies that you in the old days you used to get. We used to get GEISK exporters.
Yes.
We used to get an incentive.
It was
to
wonderful,
export.
and then it stopped.
And then research was funded by government. So it wasn't coming. You could just focus. So in retrospect, many good things in the old system, which is a pity if it fell by the wayside. But where we're fully commercial, and the world's really fully commercial, you struggle, I think, in the fruit and fresh produce sector to take those long-term views. And unfortunately, it shoots you in the foot. Somewhere down the track, because it influences competitiveness and all the rest of it. So,
but the actual farmer, he might be commercially minded, but now he's got a farm manager that's chasing a bonus or whatever the story is, and then he packs up quality stuff, and then.
But even if you're a big farmer, and I think the world is moving to mega farming across the world, but even a big farmer is not necessarily in a position to shave off too much of his net profit for research. So you're seeing this move. There's been this move towards intellectual capital holding by some of the larger businesses in the world. So, then you ask yourself, so what are you investing in? What is the long-term intellectual capital that because production, it really is a factory at the end of the day. And factories stand and fall by efficiency. That's the only. Quality is not a differential anymore. Quality is an entry-level requirement. Everyone has quality. Everyone. So you cannot fall back on that. So what do you fall back on in the long run? So in the business that I'm now in private equity, we invest in brands. We invest in brands that's been there for generations. As an example, within Nurture Brands, which is the platform that I set up after I left, after I sold my stake. Our oldest brand, Vital Health Foods, is 78 years old. It's in the third generation already. Something like Fairview Cheese is second, third generation. So 50, 60 years old. So those brands took generations to build.
Indeed.
And the question you have to ask yourself as a business person, whether you're a grower or whether you're involved in the value chain, is what is your point of difference? What are you actually building here? Because if it's only an orange is an orange is an orange, and a grape is a grape is a grape, and if you take a view 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the track, what are you building? And I think that's the problem that I see from a distance and from my experience is that I don't think that the industry has matured quite to the point where you see the growth of organizations, and you see it here and there in Spain, has become so big that they have shifted their focus. They're still in production, but they've shifted their focus largely to either brand building, intellectual capital development, which is usually around varietals and genetics. So I think that's the next phase of maturing that the industry, which is still only about 22, 25 years old, will have to get to now.
That's interesting.
Very interesting. And to improve your product, to have the edge on somebody because you've got better IP on better type of fruit, that's as you say, that's like
our previous discussion was with the IP lawyer. So it's a fascinating part of it, but again, people should actively start looking for these things.
Yeah, well, I think it's and again, it comes back to focus. If you are in a genetics business, then you've developed genetics and you focus on it and you make sure. And some of our larger growers have invested in genetic operations, and I think again that's as it goes, they will have the edge for longer than those who don't. It's a complex business. The food business is an exceptionally complex business, and the problem with it is it's such a long-term business.
Indeed.
Whatever you invest in now is only going to spit out really returns 20 years from now. I take the example of Flavorful. I mean, we literally invested in Flavorful probably 18 years ago, and I think Flavorful came into full production the year just after I sold the business, which was 18 years later, 17 years later. So
if you say full production, all the plantings that's been done,
the production was peaked. I mean, so what we planted and what came into production.
Yes.
And, so it takes so long to figure out which areas, what's the production practices, and each one of these things have its own cycle. So I think it's an exceptionally long cash flow cycle. I look at the businesses we invest in now from a private equity perspective. We invest on EBITDA multiples or earning multiples of between 4 and 6, which means if we buy a business, we have all our money back in 4 to 6 years.
Okay.
And that determines your ROI at the end of the day, whether it's a 3 times money out or a 2 times money out. This is the multiples in which private equity speak and invest in. And if you look at farming and you look at the value chain, I mean how extensive those periods are. It's difficult from an ROI perspective, but it's also very difficult from a cash flow and from a capital allocation perspective. To invest in something which you don't know whether you will be getting that return, because there's the risk element as well to it. I mean, how many varietals that are actually chosen actually get to the point where it has some sort of a point of difference. So I think differentiation in genetics is just one aspect of one way of differentiating. There's all kinds of interesting opportunities coming up. I think the e-commerce is a very interesting opportunity for certain types of businesses to leapfrog over retail.
Yes.
If you have a specific story to tell, we're invested in Fairview Cheese as an example. So Fairview is a 3rd generation artisanal cheese producer. It's a unique business that's built a fantastic brand, and there's significant online sales happening, whether it's the wine or the cheese on the front end. But because they stand for something and there's a story behind it, all of a sudden, you have the opportunity to actually interact directly with consumers. We are at a point in the world where through AI and through the internet, and you actually have the opportunity to tell a story to the final consumer if you can find something unique enough to do or to tell, which puts you again in that position. I mean, what are you as a business? You want to have a point of difference that's more than just how cheap is my produce at farm gate. And I think that's that is
it's a difficult thing. I've mentioned it to a couple of people, and maybe somebody listens to me now that we're talking here, and in particular the wine industry, because you've got how many wine cellars, and each have got their own story, and the wind blows through my vineyard, and it's because of that, and this rock here, and I think if a wine industry, particularly the wine industry, will do very well with this. If you make it completely transparent, you must go out and tell everything you do, why you are spraying this today. Tell the story. If I don't spray this, then this happens and that. Make it as transparent as you can be, because now you've got the platforms where you can have the audience, so that you've got complete trust from your buyer on that side. And
I think there is a massive breach of trust between the consumer and the food sector at the moment. And you see it across the board. You see it in America. You see the class action suits being filed against the likes of Coca-Cola and McDonald's and all the rest of it. You see the immense backlash against glyphosate at the moment. You see the cancer pandemic that we are facing. So we're in the supplement sector in one of the businesses, Vital, as you know. And I mean, what you're seeing in the world around autoimmune diseases and cancer is directly, I mean, there is no other correlation, lifestyle and our nutrition. So you're finding, and I mean, we all know in our gut that the way we have been doing this has not been right. I mean, we're sitting here in the old tannery in Wellington. So it smelled terrible when the wind blew from the north when I grew up. And the heavy metals and the chemicals used that were just dumped here in the Berg River, here at the back, those things likely stopped us. Why it is what it is now. But we've not been sustainable. So the backlash that and again coming back to how to differentiate going forward, the backlash that is developing across the board against unsustainable practices and environmentally disasters is on the one hand overdue. It is already showing in our diseases and our disease levels as humans, but it's also a massive opportunity if you can position yourself in a way where you address all of that. They talk about the 3-4 mass poisonings that we've poisoned our own water and air. First with mustard gas in the First World War, then with DDT and Agent Orange in the Second World War, now glyphosate. And we are pouring billions of liters of Roundup into the water, and the breakdown is 20 to 30 years. So all of that is becoming front and center, public knowledge because of
the internet,
because of social media and all the rest of it. And if you don't see those trends, it will be at your peril, because there is a move towards sustainability that is necessary. Otherwise, we as a species, will not have a future.
But the farmers are all the commercial farmers we get to, everybody's trying their very best to do it on a sustainable, because it's now required of them from the markets.
Yeah.
If you don't comply to this, we won't take your fruit, for instance, or your fresh produce or whatever. So that's why people must start be transparent with what they're doing. Yeah. Because at the moment, if you...
Tell the stories.
Tell
the good stories.
Tell the stories.
And break down that distrust.
Yes.
Because the distrust is big, as you say, it's there. But people believe that agriculture is killing them.
It's because they don't know.
And because sensational stories get reach. And not saying that they're not true.
How many people
can be true?
People just read a headline.
That's what I'm saying.
So if you put a nice headline to a photo that looks like something terrible, people will just believe what the headline says.
This is true.
Yeah, our attention span has become very short as people don't read anymore. So and it has become an information war. I mean, and a marketing war, really. And depends, coming back to again, what do you invest in the long run in an industry? And shaping and forming, the perception around your industry is something that's worthy of investment. And it's not something you can invest in once and think it's going to.
Yeah,
it is a consistent investment in information, because if you don't do it for a year or for 6 months, somebody else is going to be sending out a message faster and better and quicker than you.
Yes,
exactly.
And we're seeing it in the supplement sector, which is essentially a proactive. You're trying to not get sick. You're proactively trying to
remain well.
Go towards preemptive health. But it's not in the interest of many, because there's billions being made in treating the symptoms. And by the time that you show some symptoms, it's too late. You've missed the boat. You should be doing it preemptively. So that it's now a question, and unfortunately, the capital is allocated heavily towards sectors that has
a vested interest in treating people that are ill.
And I think the one thing what is interesting where we are, which is very, I think, difficult for the next generation, or the one we are part of, is that you have to realize that everything you read and everything you hear, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, even what we're saying today. Because somewhere somebody has a vested interest in terms of this. And then you look at AI and deep fakes and everything that's coming in that respect, and then you ask the question, how did this end up in my inbox? How did it end up in my feed?
Yeah,
somebody paid to get it there. And that is sort of to the point where you hopefully we're getting to the point where you make up your own mind again, because I think we've lost that ability to a large degree, is to actually reason critically about what is beneficial for you and your family and what's not, and your business.
But even like to tie in back to the story of deregulation and what happened then, it's like Louise said, it's if the board says jump, you ask just how high. if the newspaper said that is what you believed because that is. But now everything is open. The more transparent you can be with your business,
Yes.
in terms of how you do it, and I can only just see benefits.
Yeah, but you have to reap those benefits, and you have to invest in order to reap them. Yeah, I agreed.
But nobody wants to do it.
I do not have a stake in Lucentlands.
No.
By the way, so just making sure that.
But now you mentioned it.
I declare my interests.
Well, I think what you've shared with us has been very interesting, and I do think particularly, we're discussing agriculture and we're discussing human health and the health of the planet. I mean, they are directly correlated, and there is a lot of suspicion from people about agriculture.
So. Yeah.
And I think it's very important to talk about that.
Yeah.
And
if you would go back into farming now, what would you do?
What a wild card question, dear.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Yeah, I think we go from the point of view at the moment that brands really is the main game in town. That if you don't own a brand or participate in branding in some shape or form, you are an expendable commodity and supplier. And so if I have to take learnings from where we've come from, and it's very difficult in the fresh produce sector to differentiate, because you are dealing with retailers which largely are following own brand strategies,
and they want to put a commodity on the shelf.
Yes, and to be fair, I mean your standard supplier really is sitting in a 6 to 8 week window. So a retailer doesn't want to deal with those things on a day-to-day basis. So in my mind, believe it or not, and full circle, and the old days, one of our big adversaries was Louis Kriel, which was the CEO of Cape at that stage. But and Louis died, I think, about 10, 12 years ago. But Louis was right in many ways, and I am now probably old enough and wise enough to say that is that what they achieved in those days with the Cape brand, we spoke about that. And there's been some brands that's achieved that. I think at Pink Lady, they've done a fabulous job in terms of establishing Pink Lady. You look at something like Clem Gold and a number of others. So there has been, there's been post deregulation, there's been fantastic success stories. But going back to the learnings, if I have to be involved in farming, I would make sure that I link myself not only from a varietal perspective, but from a branding perspective and an equity basis in some shape or form to something that will transcend me and my farm. And brand building globally, that is how you own the consumer. That's how, and whether that very few, I think, individual farming operations will be able to build a brand like a Wilde Klaver. Wilde Klaver is in the north. You have the guys
yes, we know.
You know them.
Been there.
So wonderful what they've done in terms of building a brand around themselves and through their sponsorships and all this other kinds of things. But very few medium and even large farming operations will be able to do that. So your best bet is to connect into something, in my mind, and that's what I would have done, that has some of that, and at least have a stake in something that would be bigger than just being a pure producer. And then, of course, you've got all the other things, efficiency and the stories you tell, to your point, being environmentally conscious. I think there's going to be a premium to be had, and we've been saying this for 20 years, so I don't know if don't hold me to it, but there's a premium to be had for certain accreditations around environmentally produced products. You see farming for the future in Woolies, which is really gaining traction, I think. I see from my circle of friends that people trust what they buy from Woolies through that accreditation. So well done to them on that.
The other one is the Carbon Heroes thing, which
Carbon Heroes has just been relaunched now. The Blue North Sustainability's Carbon Heroes, and people voluntarily take part in that.
Yep.
So that's also pretty amazing to see in our country.
Yes. So that would be the first part of it. I would. I mean, you see the rise of agri-tourism. It's amazing how that's taken off again globally.
There's a big opportunity in that.
Yeah, so, and you know it was small in the past, but it's become significant. I mean, I look at some of the big American operations, whether they're making cider or whether they. There's all kinds of interesting add-ons that can be had. I would be far more efficient in terms of the use of my assets. I mean, we farmed and we had a pack house, and that pack house stood empty for 10 months of the year. It's a terrible model.
Yeah, it's an asset that's not working.
And I look at how we look at utilization of assets now and stock turnaround, and you know within the private equity sector that I'm involved with now. It's a significant part of why we would invest in a business, is how they go about utilizing their assets. So definitely, those three things I would do differently.
And what would you farm with?
Good question.
Why I'm asking that is because we all get around to. I said with all the things we've seen, the beautiful stuff, the fantastic, incredible stories and people we've met.
Yeah.
If you give me a farm now, I would not farm with anything that's got to go into a container and be kept fresh.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume that that because margins are so thin, you have to assume you have to control the environment, to the nth degree. So I would farm with something that I can control, whether it's through netting or whether it's through a factory farming type of operation. I'm chairing Elgin free range chickens at the moment. I mean, I see how absolutely controlled many of those aspects are, up to 1 days. When we slaughter, would be something that's measured. So I think anything that can be sort of more controlled, that would be preferential. Wherever climate is very where it's very climate dependent, I would put a question mark there. And then, of course, anything where the market forces are so volatile that by the time you load a container, you don't know whether you're going to actually recover the money. That is a big leap of faith, and it's one that I won't necessarily make it, where I'm sitting now.
When you're talking about the thin margins, we do a lot of work for the citrus industry, especially on the research side. And if you lose one pallet in a container, you need to almost sell 2 other containers to make up the loss for the money that you would have made on that one box.
Yeah.
And that drives, I think, the level of professionalism in this sector, because if you don't on top of your logistics, I mean, I look at many of the products we produce at the moment, it's got 2 to 3 year shelf life. So
what a pleasure!
Fantastic. So you look at the time that you work against in
Fresh produce.
Produce, and it's significant. Yeah.
Indeed. Restarting. Okay. Riël, I think we've kind of covered quite a lot. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or you?
No. I mean, it's good to reminisce a bit about the fruit sector.
Indeed.
It's been 4 or 5 years, so it's good to. There's a bit of distance between me and it, and I mean, at the end, I think food is so central to our existence that I've always said that the risk that growers take, they are not being rewarded for it. Somewhere there needs to be a correction. But I've also been saying that for 20 years, so again, don't hold me to that. But yeah, it's the risk reward ratio is not great. So somewhere that needs to turn in favor of the food sector. And then you look at all the other, you've got all the standard business challenges of markets and currencies and everything else. And then you've got on top of that, you've got climate, and you've got obviously our own local challenges as well that we're facing as a country. So no, I mean, I have a lot of respect for growers and for the sector. And the further I get away from it, the more respect I am developing.
Last time we met, you said that you were on one of the big councils. So what is the view from the international market towards South Africa, not just the fresh produce in particular, but I know that you get to interact with a lot of people internationally as well. How is that? What does the people say? Are they still interested?
Look, it depends on who you speak to, I suppose. I mean, the world is in disarray, and the world is in disarray for many reasons, and I think will continue to be for a while. So, and they all have their own problems. And I think what we're missing in South Africa is that we are piling, except for the normal international issues and competitiveness, we are piling just more and more pressure on local businesses. We cannot get above 1% growth rate. We are at
Which is disastrous.
Which is disastrous. We had 32% unemployment. I mean, our current president took over 22%. We're now at 33%. Whatever we're doing is not working. And I think it's time that business has been quiet about it. Business has been diplomatic about it. And I think the days for diplomacy is over.
Yeah.
If we want, and the world, I mean, and we saw this a little bit with the interaction between our government and Trump recently. I mean, it's very few that far between these interventions from global leaders. We are a little speck here at the southern tip of Africa. We have tremendous resilience. I think across the board, all our citizens, all the various components of that which brought us together after 1994. And we've allowed, through inaction, a few to push this to the point where we are really in bad shape. We're not getting investment. I think that's the other part of it. I look at capital flows in our private equity environment. Africa is problematic because if you have to decide whether you're going to be investing in your backyard in America or in Europe, or go and take a bet on a country at the southern tip of Africa where you see these media reports coming through, why would you do that as capital? Somebody in the private equity fraternity said the other day, you have to realize that capital is a coward.
Yeah,
He will go where he's the safest.
Yes.
He will go where he knows he will preserve himself. He will go where he knows that he will be able to give a return. There is no loyalty within capital. So if we do not become a destination that is, looks like a place where capital can be safe, we just will not attract it. And this is what you're seeing at the moment. You're looking at most wealthy companies either sitting on their capital, not spending it, or externalizing it. So we have to get back to that point, and that can only come from us all making this a sound destination again for investment. And I think we've got everything going for us. South Africans punch way above their weight. You look at
Interesting. Yes, you're right.
because we're resilient and we are pragmatic. And this is why you're seeing the likes of Elon Musk and Mr. Sachs and Riël Mallan and a number of others that are playing significant international roles.
Resilience. I looked it up the other day, and I just remembered to look it up now. And I just Googled, and it's according to the Oxford Languages, the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness, or the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, or elasticity, and similar words as pliability and flexibility. So, how long can we still stay in this squashed thing before we bounce back?
The reality, if you look at societies that work, government has two functions: to keep you safe and to keep competition free and fair.
Yeah,
that's the only two functions that a government has. And business has the ability, through the allocation of capital, and business effectively solves a problem. And we're very good at that. That's why capitalism works. And if you look at those, and it's Very simple principles. If we can get back to those principles and assist and start screaming that from soapboxes all across the country, that we need to get back to that. We need to be allowed as business to help solve the issues that are on the table. You look at the role that agriculture is playing. I mean, it's in relative terms to the economy is quite small, but you look at how rural South Africa is to a large degree held up by agriculture. And the Europeans have figured that out long ago. Why do they have these agricultural subsidies? It's much cheaper to subsidize agriculture in the rural areas of Europe than to give subsidies directly. Because if the agricultural sector is sound, then it trickles through to the businesses in that area and then to the workers in that area. So I think it's about understanding and just insisting that we have leadership that understands the basics, because we don't seem to understand the basics.
Imagine if we could get that, 350 Rand grant that was given in COVID to the workless people.
Still being given.
It's still being given, but how many millions of billions is that per month? Imagine if that could be funneled back into agriculture. How many of those people would then be supported just by those grants?
Even if not even supported, I think just left to do what they need to do, and not pile additional burdens on top of what we're already doing. I think that's the issue. South Africa is now one of the most difficult places in the world to do business. The ratings around red tape, bureaucracy. Make it easy. Make it easy to employ people. Make it easy to fire people.
Yeah, I think that's the most difficult part.
Yeah.
It's easy to employ them.
So it's and then the rest will follow.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think we can move on to our final part. We have a tradition on our podcast, and that is to ask a random question at the end, which is left for us by a previous guest.
Okay.
So, and this is always quite a bit of fun. Do you have one, or shall I?
I've got one. I can think. If you could choose and you wake up one morning, what would be your ideal day?
My ideal day. My ideal day would be to wake up and exercise, usually. I have adopted a routine of meditating, which has been life transforming. So I would exercise, I'd take a shower, I would meditate for half an hour. I would go to the coffee shop around the corner and just see what my day looks like. And then I will tackle the day from 10 o'clock onwards and probably finish at about 6 o'clock. And that day I hope to have as much impact as I possibly can on those who work with me and for me. Working towards a purpose that is bigger than myself. And that would be a perfect day.
Wow. Thank you.
Riël, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been incredibly interesting.
We've
spoken about a very broad range of things, but it's all been interesting and all relevant. And I think there's a lot of learning in there. Thanks so much.
It was my pleasure. It was fun. Thank you.